That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
All right, guys. First, I want to give you all a massive thank you on the feedback on the last video. Had a lot of great constructive comments. Had a lot of guys that kind of shot it straight with me. I love the comment that said, hey, this first 10 minutes of this video, kind of useless. Really enjoyed the last 3 minutes, though. Guys, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear some criticism that is really going to help me get the videos better for y'all. And now I want to apologize for the people on Patreon. I know I said I'll try to get y'all a podcast every single day, but to be completely transparent, a couple days ago, I drove, probably almost a week ago now, I drove across the country to visit my family. Now, tomorrow, I am driving back across the country. Then I am driving a good whiles to go see my girlfriend's family. Then we are going to go camping across the country. So basically, that's a lot of excuses for why I have not been able to get a podcast every single day. I think I've missed 2 days in the past 2 months. So guys, it's going to be all right. But nonetheless, let's just jump into today's video. And in the last video, I talked about running backs that we can build our dynasty teams around. And I really classified those running backs as guys that are going to provide top end production seasons for the next 1 to 2 years and are not going to see their value decrease over that time span. So that kind of threw guys like Ezekiel Elliott and Alvin Kamara out the window, where those guys may have a high end production over the next 2 seasons, but we aren't going to see their value maintain regardless of what their production looks like. So we are going to do the same thing with the wide receivers here. And the first couple guys are going to be a little bit obvious, but we're going to get into some guys they all may not have thought of. So starting us off with probably the most obvious guy that you can build your dynasty team around and comfortably say that he's not going to decrease in value whatsoever, and he's going to be able to return value on your initial investment in opportunity. And this is Tyree Kill. So Tyree Kill is going as the wide receiver 3 in redraft leagues right now. And of course, we're not going to look at no trash ADP like fantasyfootballcalculator.com. I mean, this is not 2015. We are going to be looking at FFPC high stakes redraft leagues, where these are where the sharpest dynasty players are playing. These are where the sharpest redraft players are playing. And that's because of the buy-in. I mean, some of these leagues are in the thousands of dollars range. And if you're putting up this money, I tend to think that you know more than random podcaster X. So Tyree Kill being drafted as the wide receiver 3 in those formats. And if we look in dynasty leagues, I mean, across all the flock dynasty leagues this offseason, he's pretty much the consensus wide receiver 3. So at only 26 years old, we can comfortably say that Tyree Kill is going to return value with his immediate opportunity and production. And he's also going to be able to maintain that value over the next 1 to 2 years just because of his stable situation and his age. Now, let's talk about some guy that I know, guys, I whiffed hard on. Last offseason, I had an infamous tweet. I said if I drafted 100 fantasy teams, I would not draft this guy a single time with where his price was, but that is Chris Godwin. And with Chris Godwin, I just completely missed it. So obviously, he had everything break right for him in 2019. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers led the NFL in passing. We saw O.J. Howard be completely vacated from this offense, where I was actually projecting him to be a great tight end. I believe in his talent, but it doesn't really matter at this point. We're looking at Chris Godwin and his profile, which is 24 years old. And right now, the high stakes redraft players are drafting him around the wide receiver 6 in those formats. And in Dynasty, that's exactly where he's going, at the wide receiver 6. So he's another guy that you can go out there and comfortably invest your second round startup pick, or even sometimes in these flock leagues. It pains me to do it, but I've been taking him in the early third. Sometimes he'll fall to the mid third in these tight end premium and super flex leagues. And if you're going to be able to make that investment, he's a guy that's going to provide that production, and he's going to maintain or possibly even increase his value, even if Tom Brady is likely not going to be there in 2021 or beyond. They're going to figure it out. I mean, Chris Godwin has the talent, he has the age, he already has the production. So he's a guy that we should comfortably being able to go out there and draft. Now, let's talk about my favorite dynasty buy this offseason. And I know I play in a ton of dynasty leagues, and I'm not someone to go out there and say, hey, I want to go get my players and I want to have them in 75% of my dynasty leagues. I mean, but I just continually go out there and trade for this guy over and over again. Y'all are probably tired of me talking about him, but this is Juju Smith-Schuster. So last time I checked, I think I have like a 50% mark of exposure to Juju. I think it may be sitting around 45%. But nonetheless, I mean, this guy checks every single box. I mean, currently he is younger than Deontay Johnson, Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin. He's only 23 years old. And I know that's going to surprise a lot of people, not if you listen to this channel very often, because I pretty much talk about it nonstop. But nonetheless, we see that this player has been able to put up production that does not really match anything else we've seen in the NFL before. And if we do try to look at something comparable, if we look at the past decade of a single season with someone who is 21 years old or younger that had at least 11 fantasy points per game, and we saw Juju Smith-Schuster put up a season that had 14 fantasy points per game, and the only people that were able to come close to him were Keenan Allen, who also had 14 points per game, and Mike Evans. So, I mean, he's an elite company over the past 10 years when it comes to fantasy producers. And we also see on this list Brandon Cooks, Amari Cooper, Sammy Watkins, Allen Robinson. So all guys that have immense talent, and Juju falls in this range. And I know one thing that's scary about him is the situation. We see in Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, his health is a major question mark. He's having a very iffy recovery this offseason where we really don't know what to expect. But if Ben Roethlisberger is able to come back at 80, 90% of what he was before, I think we can expect Juju Smith-Schuster to be in line for a massive target ceiling with what we expected last year. I mean, if you remember in high stakes redraft leagues last year, Juju Smith-Schuster was being drafted at the end of the first round, the beginning of the second round, and now he goes out there. He gets injured in 2019. We see his starting quarterback go down in 2019. We see possibly the worst quarterback play besides Kyle Allen in the league. And we see an abysmal season, which is exactly what we should have expected. I mean, if I told you that a star wide receiver was going to get injured and he was going to play through the injury throughout the entire year, you would expect that his production would be significantly down. And on top of that, if I told you that his quarterback was going to be out for the entire season and he was going to be dealing up with backup play, you would also be projecting that in for a decrease in projected fantasy points. So I don't think we should hold Juju Smith-Schuster against him at all for his 2019 season. We should zoom out, see that this is a guy that has done a couple things that really no wide receivers before him have been able to put together, especially if you consider that the volume that Antonio Brown was able to command across the field from Juju Smith-Schuster. And we should be going out there and confidently buying him at the beginning of the third round in Superflex startup drafts this offseason. I mean, it's kind of crazy that he's going there. And this is a guy that is 23 years old. Last season, he was being drafted at the beginning of the second round, the end of the first round of redraft leagues. I mean, he has everything in his profile to be a first-round startup pick, and I'm going to be pushing the button on him at the early third round. I'm going to be going out there and trading for him everywhere I can. Now, let's talk about a player that also profiles to have that age-adjusted production like Juju Smith-Schuster. This is a guy that I bought everywhere last offseason, so I don't have to really go out there and trade for him anywhere now. But DJ Moore, I mean, only 23 years old. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 9 in redraft leagues, the wide receiver 5 in Dynasty leagues. So you're going to have to pay up just because people understand that DJ Moore projects to be one of these long-term alpha wide receivers. But nonetheless, you're still going to be getting that top end production in 2020, and you're going to be able to make a safe investment that should really only accrue in value unless something crazy happens. Now, the last guy, someone I was extremely excited about and probably made 5 videos about at the beginning of this offseason. Now, a ton of other people have talked about him on podcasts, written articles about him. The Evan Silva has came out and pumped this guy relentlessly, which I like to see to confirm my bias, but at the same time, I don't like to see his price get increased this much. And this is Calvin Ridley, who's currently 25 years old, and he has an ADP in redraft leagues higher than his ADP in Dynasty leagues. And this is exactly what you want to see. You want to see a guy that is in a stable situation, that has the age on his side, and that has a price that is cheaper than what we expect these high-stakes drafters to be going out there and getting him at. So, I mean, if we can go out there and if you can trade a 2021st and a 2022nd round pick for Calvin Ridley, as long as it's not one of those top 5 running backs, I think that is a fantastic deal because you're going to be buying a low-end wide receiver 1, a high-end wide receiver 2 for not only this season, but someone that's going to be able to provide that production for the foreseeable future and not see a value decrease as he does it. So obviously there are a couple guys that y'all are probably screaming at me for leaving off this list. Guys include DeAndre Hopkins, Devante Adams, Michael Thomas. And yes, I know these guys are going to be able to put up elite production over the next 2 to 3 seasons, But we also have to understand that these guys are 28 years old. These guys are 27 years old. So 2 seasons from now, when they're 29, when they're pushing 30, their dynasty value will be lower than it is now. And that does not necessarily mean you should be going out there and actively avoiding them in your dynasty startup drafts. You just have to understand, if you decide to build a team around a guy like Devante Adams or DeAndre Hopkins, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself into being a competitor, and you have to make roster construction moves based around that. So I don't think that they are guys that you should be able to have as your core on any dynasty team, just because if you have those guys, you better be competing. If not, you're better off going out there and trading for a DJ Moore. Now, that's all I got for y'all. Really hope y'all enjoyed the video. Really hope y'all got something from it. As always, if you did, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you comment what you thought. I love reading those constructive comments. And yeah, subscribe to the channel.
That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.